history books are written in the future, somebody will have to pause and say that there lived a race of people, a black people, fleecy locked and black complected, that had the moral courage to stand up for their rights. By that interjected a new meaning into the veins of history and civilization. We are going to do this. God grant that we do this before it's too late. Those were the words of Dr. Martin Luther King when he first spoke at Holt Street Baptist Church in 1955. My name is Stephen Dean Lowenstein, and I do dramatic interpretation of Dr. King's speeches. And the goal of me being here this evening is to honor the dreamer, but also the he from whence the dream came. It's also to honor those of you here who may have lived through that period. So if you lived any time before in the period of the 60s or the 50s or even earlier than that, would you just raise your hand up for me? And all of you who are looking around here, I want you to take a look at these hands and maybe shake one of these hands and tell them, you paved the way to make my life easier. Tell them that. They took that dirt road and paved it with the cement road so that we could walk on and drive on a road that was a little more solid. And we acknowledge you and honor you tonight. I also want to thank Dr. Haddock. I want to thank Robert Adams for having me come to share with you tonight. I have a few friends in the audience, Mr. and Mrs. Downey. I believe they're here, and there they are right there. It's beautiful, and thank you for coming. I have a friend and a colleague, Kelly. Lauren is here tonight, and there she is right there in the back. Teacher of the Year at Warman Elementary. Yes, indeed, and of course, Pastor Lauren, and each of you are here this evening. I want you to think with me now, and I'll be brief, from the play that I do, Montgomery to Memphis, the man, the martyr, the method, and his mission. And as we think about this great American hero, as we think about Dr. King being a modern-day Moses, we must come to the conclusion, as it relates to him being a martyr, that he was a reluctant martyr. Most martyrs are. That wasn't his purpose in life. He wanted to be a preacher just like his dad was a preacher before him. And he wanted to serve his congregation. And he was through history, and God thrust him into this role that he had. But first he was a minister before he was ever a civil rights leader. And usually I take my audience from 1955 to 1968, but tonight what I'm going to do is take you from the mountaintop back into the valleys, and we're going to end up in 1955. So use your imagination and go with me on this journey. Right now, well, you can pick up where we are. We're in 1968 in Memphis, Tennessee, Mason Church of God in Christ. So many accomplishments had happened, and when we look at this dream of his, this threefold dream of ending segregation and bringing integration, we look at this threefold dream of reconciliation. And not only that, but self-actualization through education and economic empowerment. And so here he is, working on behalf of the sanitation workers in Memphis, Tennessee. Allow your imaginations and minds to drift back to that time. You know, if I was standing at the beginning of time, the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight by Egypt, and I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek From the dark dungeons of Egypt, through, or rather across the Red Sea, through the wilderness and on toward the promised land. But in spite of its magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would take my mind by Mount Olympus. I would see Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Euripides, and Aristophanes. They assembled around the Parthenon, and I would watch them around the Parthenon as they discussed the great and eternal issues of reality, but I wouldn't stop there. I would go by the way that the man for who I am named had his habitat. I would watch Martin Luther as he tacked his 95 Theses on the door at the Church of Wittenberg, but I wouldn't stop there. I would even go by the way and see a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, but I wouldn't stop there. I would come up to the early 20s and see a president grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of his nation. Come with the eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. But I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn and say to the Almighty, if you allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, I will be happy. That's a strange statement. Trouble all around, confusion in the land, that's a strange statement. But somehow I know that only when it's dark enough can you see the stars. And I see God moving in a way that men in some strange way are responding. Something's happening in our world. And wherever they are assembled today, whether they're in Nairobi, Kenya, Ghana, New York City, Jackson, Mississippi, or Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. And also in the human rights revolution, some done in a hurry to bring this nation's poor people out of their long years of poverty and neglect. I'm afraid the whole world is doomed. It seems that I can hear the God of history saying that that was not enough, but I was hungry, and he fed me not. I was naked, and he clothed me not. I was devoid of a decent and sanitary house to live in, and he provided no shelter. Consequently, you cannot enter the kingdom of greatness. And he do it to the least of these, my brethren. He do it unto me. And also, we've been forced to the point where no longer it's a choice between violence and non-violence in this world. It's non-violence and non-existence. That is where we are today. They have 20 megaton bombs in Russia and China right now that can destroy a city as big as New York and wipe out every building, every person. We can do the same to China and Russia. We're drifting there. Every now and then I go back and read Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. When I come and look at America, I see that the parallels are frightening. But I'm so happy that he allowed me to be here with you. You know, I'm so happy that on tonight, that each of you are assembled here. We reflect upon a great man and a great movement. I left Atlanta this morning, we got on the plane, and there were 6 of us. The pilot said over the public address system, we are sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane to make sure all the bags are checked. The plane was guarded all night, and then I got into Memphis. And some began to talk about the threats that were out or what would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers. Well, I don't know what will happen now. Got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I won't mind like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. Just want to do God's will. And He has allowed me to go up to the mountain. I've looked over. I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you. But I want you to know the night that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. It shall come to pass. Well, that's where I usually leave you. The next day, an assassin's bullet wiped out the life of Dr. King, and he was yet 1 year younger than me. I just turned 40. But I want to think about Dr. King not just as the martyr that he was, and I want to just go back and analyze him. Yes, he was a martyr. Yes, you know, it's kind of like Satan. If he would have known what he was doing when Jesus was crucified, he didn't realize fully that you couldn't kill. You might could kill him, but on 3 days later he was going to get up with all power in his hands and redeem mankind. Now, we don't worship Martin. We worship the living God that he worshiped and that I worship. And the great news about this God is his name is I Am. And so he was sure, and he will be, but his name is I Am. I am that I am. And he is available to us today as we go through challenges in our life too. And we draw inspiration from those of you who lived through that time and Martyr. But I look at him and I think also, yes, he was a martyr. But not just that, he was a man that did not necessarily he didn't want to die. He had 4 children and a wife that loved him. He didn't want to die. And if you'll play the song right now, I would like you to listen to Martin, the man. If you'll play that track for me, kind sir. Know those who say stick to civil rights? Well, I've got another answer. That is, I've worked too hard and too long now to put an end to segregation, to end up segregating my moral concern. I'm not going to do that. Other civil rights leaders refuse to take a stand or have to go along with the administration. That's their business. But I must say tonight, I know that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I'm not afraid, I'm tired of marching. I've been marching for something that should have been mine at birth. I'm tired of living every day under the threat of death. I have no martyr complex. I would like to live as long as anybody in this building tonight. And sometimes I doubt whether I'm going to make it through. Yes, I'm tired of marching. I've seen the lightning flash. I've heard the thunder roll. I've felt some breakers dashing, trying to conquer my soul. But I heard the voice of Jesus saying, still to fight on. He promised he would never leave me. Never leave me alone. No, never alone. Never alone. He promised he would never leave me. Never leave me alone. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. God bless you. Well, if you will indulge me, I haven't quite finished the journey there.
It's all right.
I I promised you I was going to take you back to 1955, and this last speech is going to do that, and then I'm going to have my seat. Went from 1968, the mountaintop, to Dr. King, when people were saying, well, why do you have to talk about the war in Vietnam? Stick to civil rights. Stick to what, your area of expertise. And you heard his answer. And he spoke against that feudal, bloody war that took place on Asian soil. And so many young men died in mounting numbers. And so he stood against what was unjust. He stood for righteousness. And I can remember there was a time that Dr. King was at his weakest, and he prayed over. This was in the year a little bit later. This was in 1955 when he was first engaged in the Montgomery bus boycott. And he said, and I've listened to it so many times. He said that, he was discouraged. He was getting threats all the time. He was getting ugly phone calls. And he went on to say that he prayed over this cup of coffee. And he prayed. He never will forget the prayer that he prayed that night. He said, now, Lord, I'm down here trying to do what's right, and the cause that I represent is right. But I must confess that I'm losing my courage. He said he never will forget that the prayer that night. He said, he couldn't call on Mama anymore. He said he couldn't call on Daddy. He's down in Atlanta, 175 miles away. But he called on that power that can make a way out of no way. And he went on to be comforted by the Lord. And so he was a martyr, yes. He was a man, but his mission, now let's look at his mission. Let's look at him. I mentioned earlier it was a threefold dream. He wanted to put an end to segregation and long years of hurt and neglect. He made an appeal to this country, the greatness in this country. And you'll hear in this speech that his appeal not only to the greatness of this country, the Supreme Court of this land, the Constitution of the United States. He makes the appeal. He says, our cause is backed by God. It's a moral cause. God is on our side. And the thing I like about this speech most is when you'll hear me, when he squares his cause, say, God is behind us. This is God's doing, and this country needs to do what's right on behalf of its citizens of color that have been neglected so many years. And the passion and the determination is an inspiration to me. And I pray it's an inspiration to you. And I believe Pastor Lauren's going to speak on some of these qualities that have been birthed or have been perpetuated, or because of the fires that people, minorities have gone through. They've come forth as many times, some, not all the time, but a lot of times, shining and stronger. And here is Dr. King in 1955. We are here this evening for serious business. Just the other day, just last Thursday to be exact, one of Montgomery's finest citizens, not one of Montgomery's finest Negro citizens, but one of Montgomery's finest citizens, was taken from a bus, arrested and carried to jail because she refused to give a seat to a white person. My friends, there comes a time when people get tired of being plunged across the abyss of humiliation, when they experience the bleakness of nagging despair. There comes a time, my friends, when people get tired of being pushed out of the glittering sunlight of life's July, left standing amid the piercing chill of an alpine November. We are here this evening because we are tired now. We are not advocating violence. We have never done that. We are Christian people. We believe in the Christian religion. We believe in the teachings of Jesus. The only weapon we have in our hand this evening is the weapon of protest, that's all. And sadly, this is the glory of America with all of its faults. If we were trapped behind the iron curtain of a communistic nation, we couldn't do this. If we were dropped in the dungeon of some totalitarian regime, we couldn't do this. But the great glory of America is the right to protest for rights. We are not wrong in what we are doing. Don't let anybody have you to believe that we are wrong in what we are doing. There won't be any crosses burned in our yards, or we won't pull somebody out their home and leave them on some distant road, beaten or dead. There won't be any Molotov cocktails in our movement. But we will march forward with soul power and meet physical force with soul force. We will make this a new nation. We are not wrong in what we are doing. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, the Constitution of the United States is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. If we are wrong, Jesus of Nazareth was merely a utopian dreamer that never came down to earth. If we are wrong, justice is a lie and love has no meaning. We are not wrong in what we are doing. We are determined to work and fight right here in Montgomery until justice rolls down like water and righteousness as a mighty stream. For we that disinherit of this land, we have been oppressed so long, are tired of going through the long night of captivity. We are reaching out for the daybreak of freedom and justice and equality. When the history books are written in the future, somebody will have to pause and say that there lived a race of people, a black people, fleece-locked and black-complected, who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights, thereby interjected a new meaning into the veins of history and civilization. We are going to do this. God grant that we do this before it's too late. Have a pleasant evening.